Israel's government has approved a government change, which has resulted in the end of Benjamin Netanyahu's 12-year reign. Let's unpack what the new government means. And for more on this, I'm joined by Mr. Steve Linde, Editor-in-Chief of the Jerusalem Report. Mr. Linde, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time. Was this an anticipated change? We know that there'd been discontent for a number of years, but this really had intensified in the recent past with the conflict that took place. Was this expected?
No one really knew if it was going to happen until the last moment, and it passed by a razor-thin majority in the Knesset, Israel's parliament. The new government was voted in by a vote of no confidence by only one vote, 60 to 59. In fact, there was one abstention from a member of the Arab party, Ram, which is for the first time in an unprecedented way a member of this coalition. But yes, it has passed, and this is officially the end of the Benjamin Netanyahu era. Of course, he can always make a comeback if the government falls, but he was Israel's longest-serving prime minister. He served for the last 12 years, and so this is quite a political watershed, quite a change in Israel.
If you could highlight for us some of the key watershed moments or events that have led to Benjamin Netanyahu now being ousted.
Well, the first thing, of course, was we've had 4 elections in the last 2 years in Israel, and everyone was doing everything they could to avoid a 5th election. So after an impasse after 4 elections, there really was time for a political change. We've had, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, which Israel coped fairly well with under Netanyahu, but it's been very challenging for this country as well. And then most recently, as you mentioned, we've had the conflict between Israel and Hamas, the Gaza war, which lasted 11 days. And all those things sort of signaled an end to the Netanyahu era in the sense that he did all he could, and it was time for a change because it didn't seem like he could cobble together a coalition. And so it was left to the opposition, both from the left and the right and the center, to come up with some kind of a unity government that would end Netanyahu's reign and give Israel a chance for a new path in the future.
And there really was a concerted effort to galvanize lobbying in this regard, specifically during the Hamas-Israel fight and the war that was taking place there. Talk to us about the steps that led to where we are right now.
Well, after the war, there was a ceasefire that was declared. This ceasefire needs to be still enshrined in a real agreement. But I think that as soon as that ceasefire was declared, it was time to politically sort out Israel's problems. And there haven't been, for example, a government that has passed a budget, a state budget in Israel for a couple of years. So we've really been in a bad situation in this country. And I think, like you said, the war and COVID-19 and all kinds of other factors brought this to a head. And I think, the Israeli electorate, for whatever reason, decided to vote again in a very, unstable fashion, perhaps because of the political system. And so we ended up with, again, a political stalemate. And it took real courage for these leaders from the right, Naftali Bennett, and the left, Yair Lapid, to come together, make an agreement with an Arab party called Ram, and cobble together a coalition of 61 Knesset members in a 120-seat parliament. So this was quite miraculous in a way that they pulled it off. And it remains to be seen whether they can actually stabilize the situation and bring Israel into hopefully a better situation, maybe start talks again with the Palestinians, and in every other way bring forward some kind of stability and prosperity for the country.
And how is this new government going to be constituted?
Well, they posed for their first photograph at the president's residence this morning, and it is quite an interesting mix of men and women and left and right, and it's going to be challenging. We have a prime minister who's actually to the right of Benjamin Netanyahu. He does not support a Palestinian state, and on the other hand, the members of his coalition, including the person really who won this election for him, Yair Lapid, is much to the left, and they do support a two-state solution. So it remains to be seen how they're going to negotiate living together in this very strange unity coalition, the coalition of change, as they call it in Israel. But we're all hoping for the best, and we'll see what happens.
And how have the citizens responded to these new changes?
I think there's been a very mixed response, even though I think the nation as a whole sort of heaved a sigh of relief that finally we have a government that's going to pass a budget and that's going to move the country forward. But the country is very polarized, very divided at the moment. It's sort of 50-50. So I think that everyone wants this government to succeed, but we still may not have seen the last of Benjamin Netanyahu.
And talking about that, my very next question to you then is, what next for Benjamin Netanyahu? Where is he likely to place himself?
Well, he's now the leader of the opposition, and he'll be a leader of a very strong opposition, because it's mostly the right wing in the opposition and the religious parties. And we'll see what he does. He has a way of bouncing back. And I think that's why not too many people are celebrating at the moment. We're all waiting to see what happens. And, because the coalition really rests on a very razor-thin majority, it can be toppled quite easily in a no-confidence vote. So it really remains to be seen if this coalition can last.
Certainly delicate times. Thank you very much, Mr. Steve Linde. He is editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post.